All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are switching over today to the torsos we've already made. Again, we have the 3 torsos. I divided my paper long ways. I've got it sort of divided in half so the head touches the top line that I've made. And down here, this lower line, this is going to be the ankles. We're going to put the feet a little bit lower. Now, there's a lot of different ways to draw a figure. I'm just to show you some of the basics, but for the most part, what we're going to do today with the arms and legs, we're going to make them a little bit longer than you would find in a real-life human. Most fashion figure drawings are taller. Whether the model is thick or thin, the legs and arms tend to be pretty long, so it kind of flatters the clothing. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to repeat the process a couple times. First things, we're going to start with the legs. So I told you again, try to find a straight edge. It doesn't need to be a ruler, but what you want to do now is we want to look at this line, and somewhere in between, just about halfway, we can mark off. I want you to be able to guesstimate that. If you really need to, you can always go ahead and sort of measure it. I'll take a look at where I measured, and you know what, I kind of guessed it pretty close, but if you see that it's too small on one part or the other part, then make an adjustment, but I don't want to drive you crazy with measurements. Should be about half. And then you use your straight edge to kind of divide that. This line over here we're going to use for our knees. All right. So this is going to be a little reference for where we're going to put the knees. Obviously, we already have the ankles. For the central figure, I'm going to start off with sort of a slightly thicker and round sort of shape. That shape is going to get a little bit thinner as it gets towards the knee. I'm going to go ahead and continue this on this side. And you notice I'm not going to put a giant gap between the legs. I'm going to keep them relatively close. So this line should follow basically just that center line of symmetry that we drew originally. And then at the end, when you get down to the knee, it's just going to taper off a little bit. If you want to, you can make a little oval right here for the kneecap. The kneecap is going to sit right on top of the line that we just produced. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start working on the calf. The calf should sort of bulge out just a little bit at the knee, and then it should be thicker up top, and as you get down towards the ankle, it should get pretty thin. Think about almost like a baseball bat, or almost like a really long chicken wing, but notice that it's a little thicker here, a little thinner there. You can make your legs fuller and wider, you can make them skinnier, but we want to get those basic shapes down. Now once we get to the bottom, we're going to add a foot. Drawing the foot, we're going to keep it simple. Obviously, there's not a lot of details here. For the foot, you're going to just extend the line down a little bit lower on the inside, the side that is towards the middle. On the outside, we are going to make it come out kind of like a triangle and just close it off. I'm going to show you a little detail that we can add to that later, but that's all we need for the foot right now. I know it doesn't really look like a foot. Trust me, it'll work out in a second. I'm going to very quickly just try to do the mirror image of that on the other side. Notice with this standing pose, I basically have those 2 legs touching. I want to try to keep things symmetrical. Got my little kneecap. I'll continue on with my calf. Again, thicker up at the knee and a little closer to that midway point for the calf. A little bit thinner and a taper. Generally, people screw up over here by making cankles or making it look a little too thick. I'm going to do a straight line down, which is, again, on that inside. And then I'm going to just basically almost make like a triangle. I'm going to go in a little closer. I'll show you one of the things that I'll do to the feet to kind of make them look a little bit more like feet. And this is a foot that's looking directly at us. What I'm going to do is on the inside, I'm going to make one little circle. Okay, that's going to be my big toe. And then I'm just going to add a couple little circles on the outside. So that's just the front of the foot. Same thing, the big toe is going to be on that inside part. So a little circle, semicircle, and a few little smaller circles on the other side. That's all we really need for that. And then on the inside part of the ankle, we're just going to make a little bump. And that is more than enough for what we're going to need for feet on our character. I'm going to zoom back out over here. And now we're going to go on to the arms. I'm going to repeat this quickly for the other 2 bodies so we'll get a lower view as well. Okay, arms. We want to make the arms a little bit longer than natural. One of the things you want to think about is, hey, listen, if you got to reach into your pocket to get your wallet, to get a credit card, your hands are going to have to be able to get all the way down here. So what you want to think of is that your hands themselves, they should kind of almost make it to about halfway down the thigh. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm just marking very lightly a little approximation of where the hands are going to be. And the wrists for your hands, they're basically going to fall right along just basically the private area. So this little area from here to here is really where our hands are going to be. For right now, I'm just going to give them a little bit of circles, these little ovals, just as space savers for my hands. Now I know how long the rest of the arm is going to be. From here to here is my arm, and what I want to do is I want to kind of divide this space from where I made my shoulder joint down to my wrist. I want to divide it in half. The first top half is going to be a lot like the leg I just drew. And notice I'm not leaving a giant gap in the underarm over here. It's going to be a little bit thinner down by the elbow. From the elbow down, you're going to have, again, just like the calf, thicker forearms at the top, thinner down by the wrist. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, trying to keep everything symmetrical. You're going to see just a tiny gap here, sort of in the midway section where the arm comes away from the body. But right here with your arms at your sides, there's not going to be a space there in the underarm. You can make the arms thicker or thinner as you like, but basically we're going to be doing this size. Thicker at the upper part of the forearm, thinner at the wrist. I'm going to go in and zoom in now on how we would draw hands. And we're going to keep it simple again for our basic figure. We've got our hands, and when you're standing straight forward, you're really just seeing the top of your hand. From the wrist on the inside, we're going to bump out a little bit, and we're going to draw just a thumb. So thumb on its own. That's all we need. It should bulge out a little bit right at the wrist, just like I've drawn it, towards the body. On the back hand over here, we're going to just go straight down, and what you can do is just draw almost just another thumb that looks a little bit longer. And that's really all we need. If you want to get fancy with it, you can kind of fake that there are a few more fingers hanging behind that, but that would be a hand hanging at its side. I'm going to do it again on the opposite side. A bulge on the inside part of the wrist towards the body. I'll draw a little finger, a thumb. The back of the hand goes straight down. You can make the fingers slightly bent like what I'm doing, and you can kind of fake a couple extra ones over there. That's all you need. We've got our first figure done. We're going to repeat it really quick over here with the other two, just slight variations. Obviously the hips are a little higher on this figure. The traditional sort of fashion figure drawing, you're going to have really elongated legs, and that was partly, I guess, to echo the models they were picking at the time, and also because I guess a lot of designers feel that that taller, leaner sort of look really flattered the clothing, even though the models themselves are sort of like coat racks walking around. So we have that longer legs. Again, the legs, they're going to be thicker up here where they connect to the hips, thinner down by the knee. You can put a little kneecap. That kneecap is going to really sit right on top of that center line. A little bit of thickness for the calves, down to a nice tapered ankle. Bottom, we're going to go straight down. I'm going to make that little triangular shape. Straight down, make that little triangular shape. Little indent on the insides for ankles. And you can do your little tiny circles here for your toes. Nothing crazy here. When we start getting into the clothing part and fashion and footwear, we'll do a little bit more as far as that, but that's all you need for the feet for right now. We're going to bounce back up, and we'll do the arms again. The arms have got to get to the pockets. We're going to keep these things relatively similar. Really long legs on this short body, really long arms. So somewhere, halfway, slightly higher than halfway up the thighs is where the hands are going to hang. The wrists just below that sort of hip bone area. I'll put a couple small circles down over here. Don't make your hands super tiny. In this case, what I'll do is, again, divide the space from here to here in half. Try to keep things equal on both sides. A little bit thinner at the elbow. A little bit thinner at the wrist. And again, I will post my picture up for you to have an example to look at. But that's going to be our basic setup. Drawing the hand real quick. bump on the inside, flat on the back, a little finger in there, just double or triple those lines. That's all you really need. These are going to be small little parts. My feeling is when people look at fashion illustrations, they're not necessarily looking at the hands and feet, they're looking at the clothing. But when they don't have hands on them, feet, or even sometimes at least a hint at faces, they tend to be a little distracting. So you want to be able to add a little bit of that. I'm going to do the last figure at full Mr. B speed, and you'll see as we go. You know, here I'm just going to make, again, legs a little thicker to go along with my more full-figured model. You can adjust these on your own as you like. Again, thighs together here, a little bit of a space between the knees. Knees are going to sit right on top of that center line. Thicker calves, thinner ankles all the way down. We are still, even though it's a fuller figure kind of model here, we are still elongating it a little bit, again, for the full effect of the clothing. Our little triangles on the bottom. Circle, 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 circle. Arms, hands, again, the wrists are going to come a little, just a touch lower. Basically where the hip bone connects to the thigh bone, it's pretty much where you're going to find your wrist. If you stood up at home right now, you would see that on your own body. I'm going to mark off that halfway point between shoulder to wrist. I'm going to make these arms a little thicker, a little closer to the body, and since we do have a lot of curves here, there will be a little bit of gap right there in the underarm. And for the forearm, a little bit thicker up here, a little bit thinner at the wrist. I've got my bump out for my thumb, flat on one side, and we've got 3 fashion figures in slightly different proportions. So that's what we're doing. That's all you need to do at this point. I'm going to take a quick snapshot of this work and post that up. The video will be uploaded shortly and it'll be on the general section. Took me about 12 minutes to add arms and legs onto this, and it took me about the same amount of time to do the torso. So for me, that was one period. For you, I'm going to give you maybe 2 and whatever we have left over today. So I think that's going to be more than enough to catch up